Next, let's talk about the 4 principles mentioned in the treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. They are divided into 4 aspects, the first of which is contemplating one's own faults or mistakes and eliminating them. The verse says, "If one does not examine one's own faults, one may act against the Dharma while appearing to follow it. Therefore, always scrutinize yourself and eliminate faults. This is the conduct of a bodhisattva." For those who practice the Mahayana path, it is necessary to repeatedly and continually examine one's own faults. If you do not frequently and repeatedly examine your own faults or mistakes, then what are the consequences? Not only will you lack any virtues such as wisdom or kindness, but even if you have faults as great as Mount Sumeru, you still will not notice them yourself. For such practitioners who are self-righteous, most other people also focus only on appearances and simply assume based on their impression that this is a practitioner. But in reality, he is nothing more than someone who is not a true practitioner, merely disguised as one. There are indeed many such cases among us. On the surface, someone appears to be a practitioner, but in reality they are not. Moreover, they are obsessed with worldly matters in this life, such as holding grudges against enemies and protecting relatives, things that are not in accordance with the Dharma. They never examine their own faults at all. Such negative actions are extremely serious. Therefore, we should always carefully and thoroughly examine the faults of our body, speech, and mind, and strive to eliminate them. This is what all bodhisattvas should do: recognize their own faults and eliminate them. This is the literal explanation. Next is the section on dependent origination. In the essential verses of the Dharma Collection Sutra, it is stated as follows: one should examine oneself regarding what is reasonable and what is not. We should frequently reflect on ourselves to see which things are reasonable and which are not. The way of the Bodhisattva also says, at all times observe the arising of thoughts and carefully examine your own faults. It seems that in the Tibetan version, the meaning is to repeatedly remind oneself, what am I really like? How are my thoughts? How are my actions? One often talks to oneself in this particular way, or what kind of thoughts and reflections arise within oneself. Truly, one should carefully examine the faults and observe in detail and frequently. For today's class, I hope that everyone will not look for others' faults. Among the people I know here, many are extremely good at spotting others' faults, but when it comes to their own faults, they basically never mention them. They think everything about themselves is very good, but in reality they are actually worse than many others. This is indeed the case. This 37 practices of a bodhisattva is really about examining oneself. Perhaps when I'm teaching, you feel like I'm scolding you every day, always talking about you, but I'm not targeting anyone in particular. But in reality, we also know that our afflictions, habits, and faults, for most of us, we are very good at pointing out others' faults. But when it comes to ourselves, how many people actually observe and examine themselves? To observe and analyze one's own faults and then eliminate them is of utmost importance. This is especially true for those who are entering the Mahayana path. It is necessary to find ways to prevent others from losing faith. Especially for us who are entering the Mahayana, we have all generated bodhicitta, right? In that case, we should do everything we can to prevent others from losing faith. This actually requires wisdom, As for foolish people, they think they are very wise themselves, but everything they do only causes others to develop wrong views. Whether it is their own actions or things related to their actions, it is very easy for others to develop wrong views or to lose faith. Therefore, we should examine our own faults and eliminate them. Protecting the mind. This is something we often talk about. The minds of sentient beings like us are extremely fragile, like glass hearts. We have a responsibility for these fragile hearts and should do everything we can to protect them. I must not act this way, because if I do, others will definitely develop wrong views about the three jewels and wrong views about me. Toward fellow practitioners, teachers, or even develop wrong views about the Dharma and so on. If we think this way, then we are truly wise. If we never examine ourselves and just do whatever we want, then that is the epitome of foolishness. The Sutra of Questions by Wisdom, Ocean, also says this: one essential practice which encompasses Mahayana is to observe one's own faults and protect all sentient beings. You see, in the Sutra of Questions by Wisdom, Ocean, it says, there is only one practice that encompasses all Mahayana teachings. What is that practice? It is to observe one's own faults, to examine our own shortcomings and cultivate a mind that protects sentient beings. Indeed, this statement is very important. Everyone should reflect on this. Don't we all claim to be studying Mahayana Buddhism? If we are truly studying Mahayana Buddhism, then the most profoundly important aspect of Mahayana Buddhism is to diligently observe our own personal faults and shortcomings. Many people have sharp eyes when it comes to seeing others' faults, but when it comes to seeing their own faults, it's as if their eyes have been blinded. They simply can't see them, so this is true. When studying Mahayana Buddhism, many people often talk about others' faults, pointing out others' shortcomings, or discussing others' faults. In this regard, they are very eloquent, wise and capable, and they have interest and enthusiasm for it, and so on. But when it comes to examining themselves, often the great masters of the past would always think, I am a person of poor character. My own practice is not good. My afflictions are very serious. Today I made a mistake again, and tomorrow another mistake. They would often direct all their wisdom of observation toward themselves, not toward others. But we are definitely not like that. We think of ourselves as perfect, like Buddhas or Bodhisattvas. As for others, we see them as the root of all faults and all disasters. So the very foundation of Mahayana Buddhism is to observe our own faults and protect sentient beings. Protecting sentient beings is also very important. We really need to protect the minds of others. The Sutra of Upholding the True Dharma also says this: preventing others from losing faith is itself keeping the precepts. When explaining the definition of keeping precepts, it means protecting others from losing faith, preventing others from losing faith and helping them develop confidence. The Bodhisattva Pratimoksha Sutra also says the same thing. Observe and eliminate the lack of faith in the world. Observe so that these worldly people do not lose faith. In other words, observe these worldly people so that they do not develop wrong views and help them generate faith. The way of the Bodhisattva also discusses this. For example, things like toothpicks and spit. When we discard these, it is absolutely essential that we immediately proceed to thoroughly cover and completely conceal them from view. Furthermore, we must conscientiously utilize either readily available water or pristine, clean ground for our needs, and under no circumstances should we ever relieve ourselves indiscriminately or at will in any location. Abandon what the world does not have faith in after careful observation. Originally, in Master Rushi's translation, it was translated as abandon after inquiry. Later, I added the phrase observe and inquire. It means that for anything in the world that people do not believe in, or that gives rise to wrong views, we should observe, look into, and also inquire about them. What are the fundamental things that cause people to develop wrong views? We should often diligently ask and carefully observe among people, and then thoughtfully recognize which particular things do not genuinely inspire faith or confidence. Consequently, we should decisively abandon those specific things that fail to foster belief. There are many such explanations like this. In the Compendium of Training, it also says, to cut off actions that bear no result. The meaning of no result is explained below. It explains the elimination of actions that do not benefit others. No result refers to actions that do not bring benefit to others. Such actions should be abandoned. Or, there are many things that cause others to lose faith, right? All of these should be eliminated. Look at this Compendium of Training. The Compendium of Training is actually more accurately called the Essential Collection of Trainings. Alternatively, it is also known as the Compendium of Bodhisattva Training. In some specific translations, it is frequently referred to simply as the Compendium of Training. So, the Compendium of Bodhisattva Training, for example, in the Buddhist Great Dictionary, it's called the Essential Collection of Trainings. It is by Bodhisattva Shantideva, a treatise that gathers together the key points of the Bodhisattva trainings. Such a treatise as this. In the Buddhist Great Dictionary, it is called the Essential Collection of Trainings. In our Chinese-Tibetan dictionary, it's called the Compendium of Training. Actually, this was translated by Rinchen and Fahu during the Song dynasty. They were the ones who produced this translation. Currently, Khenpo Tsultrim Lodro is also teaching it. He might not be able to finish teaching it this year. So this Compendium of Bodhisattva Training, or Compendium of Training, is very important, and there is a Chinese version. In the future, if we have the chance, we can also take a look at it. But this treatise is quite extensive. Here, it says, do not be rude in front of others. Speak with appropriate gentleness. Do not be rude in front of others. When speaking, use a more appropriate and gentle language. A person with the right conditions will have sincerity. What should be received can also arise. Those with the right conditions will develop sincerity. In this way, the words we speak should be received and can also give rise to acceptance. The language that should be accepted can also arise. Because if our speech and actions are in accordance with the Dharma, others will also develop faith. Moreover, others will be able to accept it as well. They will also be able to develop acceptance. The merit and benefits of observing one's own faults and eliminating them can truly inspire profound faith in others and thereby make one's spoken words genuinely trustworthy and deeply respected. Yes, if we examine our own faults, then others will also trust us. If we only talk about ourselves every day and constantly point out others' faults, then some people might tell you that what you're doing is not good and they will say so. But some people may not say anything, because when they speak, it seems you are not someone who can accept it. But everyone is well aware of it in their hearts. Oh, this person talks about their own merits every day and never mentions their faults at all. Actually, if you never talk about your faults, everyone knows that you have a great many faults yourself. Otherwise, you can't prevent the problem of others not believing you. This is also mentioned in this treatise. That is not a quality to be taken. Worldly people belittle the Buddha's seedlings. Like fire covered by ashes, sentient beings are burned as if in hell. Those who constantly talk about others' faults, or people who are always looking for others' faults, are not to be accepted. This is not something to be taken up. Worldly people will also look down on the Buddha's seedlings. So what is this like? It's like fire covered by ashes. Little by little, it will eventually burn sentient beings as well. In fact, those who often belittle others, those who talk about others' faults, will end up destroying both themselves and others. At first glance, it may not be obvious right now, but if you constantly point out others' faults, if you are always looking for others' faults, it may not be clear at the moment. It's just like fire covered by ashes, but in reality, it will eventually harm both oneself and others. This is also explained in the chapter on preventing harm to others. As was just mentioned in the compendium of training, if a bodhisattva does not guard against negative actions of body and speech, then others will also lose faith and look down on you, if we are not careful. This fault is indeed very serious. Today we are also emphasizing this point here. One is the hope that we each examine our own behavior. You may think what you are doing is right, but in reality, what we do may cause many beings to develop wrong views. In this case, the fault is very serious. Also, if we are always pointing fingers at others or constantly criticizing them, then this fault is also very great. On the surface, it may look like we are repenting, reciting or meditating ourselves, or engaging in some Buddhist practice, but in reality, our actions are completely contrary to the true Buddhist principles of cause and effect and making the right choices. They go in the opposite direction, and as a result, others may fall into lower realms. In this way, you also become a wrongdoer. Because your improper actions cause others to develop wrong views, if they ultimately fall into lower realms, we also bear a certain responsibility for that. This should also be mentioned in the compendium of training, right? Therefore, the Buddha's precepts are meant to be upheld. How could we let others lose faith? So if we sum up the Buddha's precepts, actually, regardless of who the sentient being is, if they do not develop faith, then we should definitely refrain from such actions. This is something we ought to abandon. This point is also explained in detail in the Jewel Cloud Sutra, where it is supported by scriptural citations and explained thoroughly. There isn't much left, so let's finish this section. In addition, Atisha also said, "Do not look for others' faults, but examine your own shortcomings. One should cast away one's own faults as if they were foul blood." If we have some impure blood, it's best to get rid of it, isn't it? So, examining our own faults and not looking for the faults of others is very important. Because when it comes to our own faults, we often actually don't learn very well. Otherwise, if we had learned well, just this one point alone, many Dharma friends tend to focus on others' faults and talk about others' faults. Some do so openly, while others don't directly mention the faults. But in reality, it still ends up being criticism of others' faults. As Buddhists, especially as Mahayana Buddhists, this is truly and utterly terrible. We really truly need to reflect deeply on this significant situation. A couple of days ago, I specifically talked about the importance of patience. In the same way, this is also something we can observe in ourselves. How many times a day do we talk about others' faults? How many times in a month do we mention others' faults? This year, it's not that we are demanding it. We also hope that everyone will keep a diary. When writing your diary, there's no need to praise yourself. If we praise ourselves as ordinary people, there's really nothing to praise. We're full of defilements. There's nothing special about us. You should take a look at yourself. If you find yourself praising yourself, that is your greatest fault. And as for noticing others' faults, how many times a day do you mention them? Count for yourself and see. There are many things that honestly I sometimes also, just the day before yesterday, I was also thinking about this and mentioned it in class. Here, there are even some people who don't even wear their robes properly. This too is noticing others' faults. But as a manager, maybe I have no choice. Personally, if I had nothing to do with management, when it comes to the lamas and the nuns, I wouldn't mention their faults either. Nor would I point out the faults of lay people. But because I have a responsibility, sometimes not saying anything doesn't seem, it's not appropriate in this kind of setting. But what I hope is that apart from our managers and kenpos, who sometimes have to say something for the sake of management, the rest of the ordinary monastics, if you can stay here, then just stay here on your own accord. If you can't stay, if you can't stand it, then don't stay here. If you really can't stand it but still insist on staying, I don't think that's necessary. It's not like we're inviting you to stay here anyway. Some people are always saying this is wrong, that is wrong every single day. Their minds have become completely controlled by demons or by afflictions, which is really quite pitiable. In that case, I don't think there's much point to it either. So when it comes to seeing others' faults, it really is a very serious negative karma. Venerable Dromtonpa also said this. Those who expose their own faults are wise. If you can expose your own faults, that is the mark of a true wise person. Also, Geshe Potoa said, for ordinary beings, in order to benefit others, the main thing is to eliminate your own faults. When we, as ordinary beings, want to benefit sentient beings, the best way is to eliminate your own faults. This is how you benefit sentient beings. If you try to directly benefit sentient beings, now may not be the right time for that. As ordinary people, as long as you don't look for others' faults, sometimes we see that some great masters, some people, whenever someone starts talking about others' faults, they immediately change the subject. I really admire that. When it comes to talking about others' faults, some people don't even need prompting. They just start talking about them themselves. That's really quite pitiable. But some people, as soon as they see someone about to talk about others' faults, they say, let's change the topic. Or you simply don't go along with them and immediately steer the conversation in another direction. This is indeed the case. When ordinary people want to benefit sentient beings, they should first eliminate their own faults before anything else. Harawa Geshe also said, do not scrutinize the faults of others. Examine and eliminate your own faults. Shawa Geshe as well once spoke in a self-critical way, saying, one fails to notice one's own major mistakes, yet easily spots the tiniest faults in others. This is truly, truly laughable. Many of us really have some very serious faults, but we think of ourselves as extremely good. Then if others have even the slightest fault, we immediately point it out and notice it. This is truly a ridiculous thing. Buddhist Master Togma Sangpo also once spoke in a self-critical way, saying, I have neither wisdom nor pure precepts, nor any virtues such as a noble character, yet I still boast about what a virtuous and wonderful person I am. And as for my own faults, even if they are as huge as Mount Sumeru, I still can't see them. But if others have even the tiniest speck of a fault, I can spot it. Don't we often say that even if there's a yak on our own face, we can't see it, but if there's a tiny louse on someone else's face, we can spot it right away? We have a whole pile of our own faults. No matter in which aspect, the faults are extremely numerous, yet we don't notice them at all and still feel quite pleased with ourselves or even smug about it. And when it comes to others, even the slightest fault must be pointed out. Just as we're discussing here, if someone else's fault is as tiny as a speck of dust, you still notice it. But your own faults are as massive as a great mountain, yet your mind is focused only on self-interest, while you keep talking about benefiting others. You pretend to be a practitioner, but are only pursuing high status in this life, seeking fame and material gain. In the past, it was also because you didn't examine your own actions and ended up deceiving yourself. Actually, here, Bodhisattva Togme Sangpo is speaking to himself. He's saying this to himself. Each of us, too, should be able to critically analyze and criticize ourselves. I am so truly terrible. I am so incredibly unreasonable. I have so many significant faults and imperfections, while others are so perfect. This is how we should think. This is what the 37 practices of a bodhisattva teaches. Has today's session gone on a bit long? But this section is also very important. In our practice, we should try our best not to speak of others' faults and not to look for others' faults. This is what practice is. This is what benefiting others means. Everyone, remember this point. All right.
Om Bandhangara Padmasada Om Bandhangara Padmasada